And we're rolling. What's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another episode of the Dragon Ball Super Podcast. This time, I have with me my teammate and Shenron Lair's competitive captain, Chris Welch. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing very good today, man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, it's pretty awesome to have you on. I know you're really excited to be on the podcast, and I really appreciate it. You know, I don't look at myself as like one of the bigger channels, but you know, you guys really talk me up, and I really do appreciate it. You know, I'm trying not to let it get to my head or anything.
You definitely got to give yourself more credit than that. Come on, man. You got 1,000 subscribers now.
That's pretty.
I think you're blowing up. You're definitely blowing up.
Dude, I'm just having a lot of fun with it. It's super awesome. But yeah, so I wanted to have you on because I feel like you're a really good person in the community to talk to, and some people honestly, like, I don't give you the credit where it's due for you. I mean, I have to say, one of the best deck builders in the game. Like, personally, I've played your decks and I'm on the team with you, and it's really helpful. So we'll get into, this is gonna be kind of like an interview / free flow kind of conversation. So let's start like with your card game background. So where did it all start for Christopher Welch?
Well, in high school, I played Yu-Gi-Oh! So like my competitive card game background started there, you know, back in like 2005 or so. Mm-hmm. I would be, you know, at lunch playing with the kids on the tables there, right? And it grew into me going to tournaments and, you know, eventually, you know, doing research and trying to find my competitive edge and, you know, just growing as a player. And I learned a lot of my philosophies from Yu-Gi-Oh! So I started playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2013. So that's when I started traveling to events and I started getting serious about it. And I did pretty well in that game. I got 3 YCS tops.
Nice.
Which are, yeah, I mean, the ones I went to were about 1,500 people.
Yeah,
12 to 1,500 people each.
Yeah, so, they get huge. They get huge in California.
Yeah, not just California. I topped in Austin, Texas, and Las Vegas as well.
Dope.
But yeah, I agree. We get really big tournaments here as well. I also at the time was playing a lot of regional tournaments. So our regionals had 500 to 600 people, and to top at those events, you had to get top 8. Yep. Meaning in 9 or 10 rounds, you had to go X1 or better. So in that environment, I made 10 regional top 8s. So I have, you know, a pretty good record at regionals as well for Yu-Gi-Oh! But in 2016, I put the game down for good. I was, you know, I wanted to move on, maybe play poker competitively or just, you know, feel like I had, you know, time spent in other things that was better prioritized. So, and I didn't, you know, think I would play another card game. I had all these skills from card games, you know, the people I met, I learned a lot. And, you know, but I never actually thought I would play another card game until my friend Amir Ibushi in the end of summer 2017, he picked up the Dragon Ball Super set 1. He had 2 full play sets of everything, right? So he's like, hey, come play this card game with me. And I said, no. I was like, no way, I'm not going to play any other card games. And he tried to convince me for like a month to play with him, right? He had all these cards and nobody to play with. And eventually just like, okay, fine. You know, if you're going to sell them or whatever, then I might as well play a couple games with you just because you have them, right?
He suckered you in.
He suckered me in, boy. I was hooked the first day. Oh man, he lives an hour away from me. I want to make this clear. He lives an hour away from me. So that day I had driven an hour to play with him, and I was there the next day playing with him for another 10 hours or something. You know, I went back and played multiple times. Yeah, it was one of those things where I was hooked. I had made a commitment, and I was like, okay, but if I'm gonna play this game, I'm gonna play it competitive. I'm gonna do it the best I can. So that's what kind of started it all. We started traveling to events, and we went to you know, like 1K tournaments locally and 2K tournaments locally, and we were pretty active online. And it turned into having a friendship with Marcus Cantarsi. He's a California player as well. Amir knew him from a different game, so we met him and played alongside him, but not on a team with him in the Vegas ARG regional in January. So that was let's see, 10 months now. 10 months, yeah. So yeah, and then we talked about the game. We decided, hey, we could make a team, you know, we could partner up. I did well there, Marcus did well there, Amir did pretty well there. He was the one who went away from topping, and then we, you know, so we all topped essentially. And yeah, so we decided to make a team. We said, okay, maybe we can, you know, turn this brand into like a real team. And we just started getting more competitive. Said, okay, we're going to travel. We're going to go to Gen Con. We're going to try to make our name there. We did. We traveled to different regionals since then as well, and done pretty well. Yeah, I got my win in LA, which was the largest regional to date, 500 people. So that was really exciting. And yeah, to this day, I made, let's see, top 32 at ARG Vegas regional, top 32 at San Jose regional. I made top 32 at both Gen Con days. And then I got first place at LA regional. It was first in Swiss. So some people might not want to count that, and that's fine. But first in Swiss at LA regional for the Bandai regionals.
I think that's pretty legit.
Yeah, I'm pretty high up on the leaderboard at the moment. Not too far behind.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where we are today. So
for sure, yeah, and we gotta get on Marcus about updating the Shenron's Lair leaderboards and KTM leaderboards too. That'd be really cool to see those updated. But yeah, you bring up a lot of interesting points, and it's awesome to hear like the story of the beauty that is Shenron's Lair starting up. So was it you, Marcus, and Amir were the first 3 team members?
Yeah, so we had decided we were going to work together and find some members locally that we thought could represent us pretty well. But originally it was Marcus, Amir, and I. And then, you know, the original members, there was maybe 7 or 8 of us. We had a few people from, you know, all over California representing. And we even had an East Coast member at the time. His name was Evan Vargas.
Okay.
So when we started up, it was like 7 or 8 of us. But yeah, it was the 3 core members to start everything up were, Marcus, Amir, and I. And yeah, we just it's blossomed to what it is now. We have a 2 roster team, essentially. We have an East Coast roster and we have a West Coast roster. So we should have good, accurate representation across the board for all regionals. That's one of the things that we haven't had before. Since we're a West Coast team, we're all primarily based in the West Coast. We weren't able to attend all of the regionals like most of the East Coast players were. You know, I don't want to name any names, but these guys traveled to every single event. And, you know, I think we'd be a lot higher in the leaderboards if we were able to do that. So at least this way, Shenron Lair will have that representation.
Yeah, and if Bandai starts kind of calculating their own leaderboards, like that's gonna be a fresh start, and I think that Shenron's Lair is gonna be in a great position. And as objectively as I can say this, obviously I am biased, but I think that we've picked up like most of the best players like in the game, which is absolutely just awesome. I'm super excited moving forward. But
definitely.
You bring up a lot of interesting points too. Like I like the thing with quitting card games and coming back. You know, I know people that kind of fall to one to two extremes. So people that quote unquote quit, like my best friend actually quit Yu-Gi-Oh for a while, but like air quotes quit, and you know he never sold any of his stuff, never did anything like that, and then came back to the game like 2 weeks later, just like, yeah, I didn't really quit. But I know other people that have just like other people have like sold out, and like you said, like won't touch a card game ever again. So it's kind of interesting that this game kind of was able to pull you back in.
Yeah, you know what? There was a saying in Yu-Gi-Oh! I believe it was, you know, yeah, he's quitting, but I'll see him again next month. There's something along those lines, kind of what you just said. And that was the truth. Nobody ever really quit Yu-Gi-Oh! You know? But yeah, at the time for me, you know, it got to a point where it's like I had taken breaks for years, you know, and I come back to it, but I was done with it. I didn't like the direction of the game, you know? And it was like, okay, if I'm not going to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is my best game, then I might as well never play another card game because I'm going to be way behind the curve of all the players. You know, all these established games like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, you know, players have had years and years to study the card pool, and just, you know, it would just take me so much work. It wouldn't be worth the hassle. The cool thing about Dragon Ball Super, it's a brand new game. There's a lot of mechanics in this game that haven't been introduced in other games. And I think that even though it is kind of like a melting pot of all the best parts of each game, I think it is its own unique game. And it has, you know, because it's so fresh, I would have the opportunity to start from the ground up like everybody else. Everybody else is on an even playing field. So I knew that you know, basically the concepts and the principles that I learned that I hold true to in myself for Yu-Gi-Oh! I think a lot of those translate to other card games, and knowing those things would give me a step up, I think, to other players.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like I pretty much was done with Yu-Gi-Oh! Too in the same kind of manner. Like really didn't like where the game was going. It was just too obviously broken, and Konami didn't really care about changing it. And like you said, like joining Magic or joining Pokemon is very intimidating because there's the player, like you said, have had so much time to do their thing. And the nice thing about Dragon Ball Super is how fresh it was, and that was one of the big things that attracted me to it and kind of encouraged me to start a YouTube channel, because I wanted to start a Yu-Gi-Oh! Channel. I'd played for about 5 years, and I like building wonky decks and this and that and the other thing, but it was just so established that it's hard. But to get started, but with Dragon Ball Super is really fresh and really kind of just rejuvenating. But so you mentioned your regional tops, your accolades. You won a regional, which congratulations again. That's it's super awesome to be on a team with players of this caliber. So let's talk about the invention of Hercule. So that was for the most part, you were the 90% of the creator of that deck, right? And I know a bunch of people helped you tweak it and put it together.
Yeah, right. So we all have our circles. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So yes,
I don't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all good. So I just want to know, like, how did the invention of that come about, and like where did Hercule plus Zeno button equals broken come into play?
Man, okay. Well, Hercule, when he was first released, I mean, I'm sure there was a little bit of buzz on the card advantage you can get with him, and a lot of people chose to give up because there's no way he's energy efficient enough to substantiate a long game.
Yep.
He can have all these cards in hand, but he can never do anything proactive because his energy has to be untapped.
Yeah, a lot of people. A lot of people were really afraid too that because he's so small, the cards you'd make back up on comboing, like with his effect, you would just have to waste more cards to defend anyway. People were afraid of that.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think that people would discredit him because of the last Hercule, the draft box Hercule. That Hercule was a meme, to say the least. In testing, it never worked out, right? And people saw this Hercule and were thinking the same thing. Oh, he's a 5K leader. Oh, he's a 10K leader. But if you read the card, if you look a little bit deeper into the effect, the leader is a 10K on the front and a 15K on the back, if you were comboing a 5K for free every turn.
Yep.
So you're never losing a card to combo. Essentially, his base will always be the same as a regular leader. And so that was, I think, what was overlooked the most. People would look at him and think of him as a meme leader, and I just wanted to find a way to abuse that ability because I knew he was really a 15K leader, a 10 and 15K leader. So that was the main thing,
fair point.
Finding a way to use him energy efficiently. As a red leader, he's held back so much. As a draw 3 leader and a red leader, he has no real way to untap his energy outside of Senzu Bean, right? Or Zeno button. So that's what gravitated me towards Zeno button. Zeno button, with Hercule gaining the massive amount of cards in his hand, the -1 from Zeno button never really mattered.
Yep.
But what it allowed you to do was tap out on your turn for a very strong power play or multiple, just a long turn. You can have multiple where you burn all your Senzu Beans essentially and play a bunch of guys, right? Well, you're able to tap out and do those plays because of Zeno button. It allows you to play it so proactive and then fall back, kind of like the way SS3 did.
Yep.
So it operates very similar in that regard. But you're drawing 2 with your super combos, and all your 1-drops will draw you 2 cards instead of 1, essentially. So in Play-by-Play Pro, that card, man,
is the nuts.
It's so good, dude. Like, you don't even need to awaken with your leader because you could just play that guy, draw 2, and then combo him, draw him another one. I think that was once I put together the whole Hercule equals card advantage, best card advantage leader. He has all the access to the 1-drops, and he has this base to him that's just solid, right?
Yep.
He just needed a finisher,
and that's
I spent the most time looking for the finisher, and it didn't come. Demigra didn't come until the very end.
Yeah, talk about
came.
That.
So the way we thought about, or at least I did, because I think by this time, I found the core of Hercule. Everybody understood it's a card advantage, at least in my circle. They understood it's a card advantage leader, but they didn't understand how to win the game with it. And they thought, okay, well, there's no way to win the game with it. There's no point in playing it. It only has a good Storm matchup, essentially, at that point.
Right.
So I didn't give up. I'm like, no way. There's no way a leader like this, a card effect in this game, like a card effect in any other game like this would be the best. I don't know how this isn't the best in this game, right? So I knew there was something there. I just had to figure it out. It just took a long time. And again, it wasn't easy. The first version had, Mira and the Champa, and which was great, by the way.
Very
Peter Katani had a lot of success with that. And even in the final versions of the deck, that tended to be one of the major win conditions, especially in the mirror match. So it became very important. But that's where we started, And then we thought, okay, well, that's a surefire thing. That's a guaranteed 2 damage. What else can we do? We looked at all cost Vegeta, Universe 7 Beerus. We can tap 5 energy and play Beerus. He might not win us the game immediately, but he will put us in a position to win the game almost every time.
Yep.
And we can play Xeno button to back him up. So they're not going to kill him unless they have a hard removal spell. So that, you know, it turned into that. And it was like, okay, as I'm playing more games with this deck, I'm realizing, oh, I have way more cards in my drop area than I realized, and I'm not overwhelming every turn. I want to overwhelm more often. So I started jamming more overwhelms in my deck. And I think at one point it had like 6 overwhelms.
Yep.
Okay. And it became like, okay, I'm just using Scientist Fu and Massayan and Mira. And then now I'm using, you know, 1 Shrouded Fu. And then, oh, I'm trying this Overseeing Trunks. You know, I was testing 1 of each at one point. And then it just dawned on me, and one of my teammates, Pat O'Neill, me and him were discussing the deck, and he was at this point, maybe a few days before AC, we come to this conclusion like, hey, Demigra, we run all these black cards in the mirror match. We don't have an edge, and you can only play around the SCR by not charging the 6. And we're talking about the Goku Oob SCR, right?
Yep.
So Demigra, we're thinking, okay. So we can only play around that thing by not charging the 6 and then Fu Shrouded. So those would be the 2 main pillars in the mirror match. But then we're like, oh, Demigra comes down on 5 and it steals the Fu and it steals the SCR from them. So it's like completely obliterates the mirror match.
Oh yeah.
So that's when we're like, okay, that's our edge. That's what we needed. It was looking for the edge in the mirror match specifically, and we only needed to do that because Peter Katani had access to the list at some point, and he topped with an earlier version of the deck.
Yep.
So we knew it was a known quantity that people would be playing with it. So we needed that edge, and that's what it became. You know, you guys, you saw that. You were able to play with it.
Dude, yeah, playing it at AC, like there were plenty of people that had the Hercule deck, but they didn't know the Demigra Secret Rare, and that was like the super secret spice of the weekend. And
yeah,
and that card, like going into mirror matches where my opponent just was not put onto that card, it just was so significantly easier. Like it was crazy. Yeah, that card was super good. And yeah, so it's really interesting that you bring up Yu-Gi-Oh philosophies in deck building and playing and related to Dragon Ball Super, because they're 2 very different games. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, like Dragon Ball Super is like raw card advantage a lot of times winning the game, where Yu-Gi-Oh is a lot more kind of virtual advantage. Yeah, so like you have cards that, you know, you'll take a -2, but if it wins you the game, it wins you the game. That's a lot of how sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh can work out. And I feel like Dragon Ball Super is maybe moving to more of a position like that when you have, like, basically you take the negs because the card is so powerful that it's worth it. So like a card like Xeno Button, like, is a perfect example of that. Like, okay, I'm taking a -1, but my leaders draw me so much anyways, and this effect is so worth it that this virtual advantage, the energy on tapping is so good. So I think that's really, really interesting to bring up.
Yeah, so deck building philosophy for me, I've always held 4 key principles for what defines the best deck for me. And it came from Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've always translated it to Dragon Ball Super, and it's worked perfectly. And there's 4 pillars to that, okay? Consistency is number 1, generally speaking. And I'm going to go out of order, but consistency is generally always number 1. Making sure your strategy, whatever it may be, does it as consistently as possible, as often as possible.
Yep.
So you're looking at a tournament that you want to do well in, and to 8 rounds of Swiss plus cut the top 16. Let's just say that, okay? So 16, 8, 4, 2. That's 4 rounds of post Swiss plus the 8 rounds of Swiss. That's 12 rounds you're gonna have to play in order to win the whole event, and that means you're gonna have to win 24 games, right? Yep. 12 rounds, 24 games, a minimum. Essentially, something along those lines. So you have to have a lot of consistency over 24 game spread.
Right, your deck has to do what it's built to do that long. Yep.
Right, give or take a couple of games. You might lose a round, whatever. But in general, that's what you have to look at. Yep. So, consistency is number 1. Okay, but then you have, in my opinion, is close to number 2 or number 2. It's your ceiling of your deck. How much can it do on a given turn? And some decks have higher ceilings earlier in the game, some decks have higher ceilings later in the game.
Yep.
Storm is a great example of a deck with the highest ceiling in the early stages of the game. It can do the most, it can generate the most amount of actions in a given turn. So that's what ceiling equates to. Ceiling is, what is your deck's max potential? Okay.
Yep.
So you want a deck with a high ceiling, whether it be a high ceiling in the early game or high ceiling in the late game. You need a deck with a high ceiling. Yep. So Hercule doesn't actually have a high ceiling. So this is, let me get into the other 2 points and I'll go back to that point. Okay?
Sure, and I really appreciate you going in depth on the definitions of these things for newer players. It's really helpful.
Correct. So you also have with ceiling you have a floor, okay, and that's the bare minimum of what your deck can do. And a lot of players like to have a higher floor because that means their deck can do at least the minimum every single time, more consistently. But again, I think higher ceiling will win you tournaments. Higher floor will get you to top tournaments. So that's a philosophy I can go into a little bit later as well. So the third pillar is your meta matchups. And that is, what is your expected metagame and how is your deck compared to each and every matchup? And in Dragon Ball Super, matchups are incredibly important. Knowing how to tackle each matchup and adjust to each individual matchup is one of the key things that makes a good player and a great player, I think. The difference is a great player will be able to identify all the matchups and be able to adjust perfectly, whereas a good player might not be able to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, like in certain matchups in this game, like Chain Zeno or Cell Chain, you have to play 110% differently than you play against like Storm. Totally agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good example. And then, so I think meta matchups is very important. Your expected metagame, whatever you expect to play against, your deck has to have a good matchup against at least majority of them. Or, if what your expected matchups are, you have to have good matchups against those. And the last thing is auto wins. Auto wins come in the form of like auto win matchups. Like your matchup is a 90-10, so you're automatically pretty much going to win that matchup.
Yep.
Or you have auto win bombs, which are like, for instance, at all cost Vegeta with Bad Ring or Mira Bad Ring, right? Those cards will just win you the game in their scenarios, and you'll automatically win against pretty much any matchup.
Would you consider the new 7-drop? Sorry, would you consider the new 7-drop Gogeta to be a card like that?
Well,
it's kind of weird, right?
7-drop Gogeta has a lot of paradoxes, in my opinion, when it comes to deck building. A lot of the good like Vegetas don't match power level with the good Gokus and vice versa.
Right.
So your deck's generally like bogged down a little bit. I think that card is an auto win card. It's a bomb. It's a late game bomb that probably will win you the game and it's most matchups. Yeah, so I would say yes. But but because of that would be taking away from consistency, one of the other pillars.
Yeah, the rest of your main deck has to suffer.
I mean, you're really, unless you have like a deck like Hercule, for instance, which already runs the Goku and the Vegeta, so it doesn't lose anything by running the Goku, the Gogeta 7. Excuse me. So yeah, that's an auto win card. Auto cost Vegeta, those cards, auto win cards. So you have to have some sort of auto win scenarios that you expect in the tournament, whether it be matchups or just bombs in your deck that will auto win you almost any matchup. So I think those are all very important. Now Hercule doesn't have the highest ceiling. It didn't have the highest ceiling compared to the other decks. Obviously Storm does. Storm has the absolute highest ceiling, right? So why did I think Hercule was the best deck for AC or the best deck for Vegas or for that weekend in general? Because the other three pillars were so high, it counteracted that. So your consistency for Hercule was incredibly high. You're always doing the thing. You're always doing it. Yep. Whether you'll be, drawing a lot of cards or adjusting your matchup, however you need to, it will always be doing the thing. Okay. And then that's the consistency, right? And then meta matchups. It was projected, the projected meta for those tournaments was Storm. So having that 90-10 matchup also worked into the auto win scenario. So because of that, the ceiling was actually like, I think it was okay to sacrifice and so I think does that make sense to you? Am I explaining that correctly?
Totally. Like, yeah, if your matchup percentage is 90-10 in a certain matchup, your ceiling doesn't have to be high because what your deck does will win you the matchup anyway.
Right, exactly. So Hercule at the end of the day was a big meta call. But I don't think that people ever expected it to be as strong and as powerful as it really was, to require a hard counter like Universe 7 Frieza. I don't think people expected it to be that high. And I think a lot of the decks that were going into AC in that weekend, or at least Hercule wasn't really a known quantity. It was only known through Peter Katani.
Right. It was like low key. People thought it was more rogue than anything else.
Exactly. Like, oh, Peter did well with a bad deck. Kind of one of those things. And in reality, it was actually one of the best decks in the format, one of the pillars of the format. I can't say it was the best deck. It likely isn't. Storm probably is still the best because of the ceiling, but it keeps Storm in check, and because of that, there's a deck like Universe 7 Frieza that can win a whole regional because of it keeps Hercule in check. So now you have this revolving door, and I don't think people considered the revolving door as much before AC.
Yeah,
at least Hercule being in a revolving door. So yeah, that was just one of the things. So that's why Hercule really became to be. Storm was everywhere, and it was one of the hard counters to that, but also it had really good matchups against everything else.
Yeah, definitely had really good matchups across the board. You brought up an interesting point that I have a question about. So in terms of you've played, I know you've dabbled in several different card games. So this is something I noticed in Dragon Ball Super, that it comes up, but not as much as it used to come up in Yu-Gi-Oh, where you can potentially outplay your opponent. And I think that that's a little bit diminished in Dragon Ball Super because of cards that auto win, like the cards you mentioned, like the auto win bombs. So in terms of like card design and philosophy, how do you feel about the auto win bombs in this game, and how it applies to being able to outplay your opponent, and how it might look for the future of the game?
Okay. Well, this game has very low interactive cards.
Right.
Cold Bloodlust and Crusher Ball are the only ones I can think of that really interact with your opponent's plays.
Oh, dude, don't forget about Ectoplasm. That card's busted.
Oh yeah. in your niche deck, it'll be perfect. It'll be the counterplay, if they call it counterplays. But anyways, because of that, I think a lot of it comes down to matchup knowledge.
Yep.
And you should be adjusting from the very first turn of the game. You should be adjusting for that in-game bomb.
Yep.
So you don't lose to that in-game bomb. I think everything in this game has a counter and has a way to play around. In essence, not always, but in essence, there are majority of those. Like Cell, for instance. Cell chain is just by lowering your hand count early in the game and protecting your life. And obviously, you're using your life as a second hand once they are forced to cell chain you. Once they're out of plays, and the last play they have is cell chain, and that's it.
Yep.
So a lot of the time, you can adjust from turn one by playing around that bomb, knowing that they have cell chain, and this is how I'm going to deal with it. And that can be said for almost anything. Against Announcer, I will not go below 4 life ever, because Announcer has 2 triple strike 45Ks they're going to drop on me at some point, and I know that. So if even one of those gets through and I'm under 4 life, I will lose the game. And they can get really high on that combo power. So, Announcer, you have to adjust for Showdown, Goku and Showdown Vegeta, right? And, I think that plays into every single deck you play against. Storm, you know that the Ape is coming, they have Scientist Fu and Furthering Destruction Champa. A lot of the time, there's nothing you can do against it, because you only have 1 or 2 energy to defend it, and they've already attacked you 15 times. So,
oh my gosh.
But that's a little bit different. Storm is a deck you have to adjust for in the main board.
Yeah, and definitely a meta warping deck.
And/or side heavily, right? And/or side heavily for it. So that's maybe a bad example of that. But I think just in general, most decks will have those bombs that you can just adjust for from the start and play around from the start. That's why matchup knowledge is so important. Knowing what your opponent's deck is capable of. And that might not be clear to you at first. A lot of time people are playing like Hyrudegarn or Shenron, and those are very generic strategies. It could be Hyrudegarn Storm, it could be Hyrudegarn Shade Zeno, it could be Shenron anything, So, how do you adjust against a deck you don't quite have all the info from, right?
Yeah.
The leaders are so generic. Well, you have to pay attention to what they're charging. You have to pay attention to what they're charging and what they're comboing. And you try to adjust as early as possible once you get a read on their finishers. So once against Shenron, if they combo or they charge a 20k bad Goku, then they're playing for Gogeta.
Yeah.
Don't go below 3 life, or don't go below 6 life, essentially. If you're playing against Storm, well, okay, that's a bad example. Let's not talk about Storm, okay? If you're playing against Hercule, their bombs are Demigra, and there might not be a counter to Demigra. You have to side for that. Maybe it's Pressure Ball or something like that. But that's something you're gonna have to adjust for in the side if you can't adjust for it in the main board. So there's certain cards in this game that you can't adjust for, or matchups that you can't adjust for in the main, that you're gonna have to dedicate a majority of your side for, or just dedicate some of your side for.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. Like matchup knowledge in this game, I guess, equates to like utilizing your cards to the max potential in something like Yu-Gi-Oh. I personally would like to see a lot more interactive cards in this game, more along the lines of things like Crusher Ball and Cold Bloodlust. Well, Do you want to see more of that, or do you think the game is in a good interactive state right now?
As a competitive player, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to see more of that. I don't think the game needs it because the matchup adjustments are enough. In my opinion, majority of the time they're enough. But yeah, there are some cards that require cards like Cold Bloodlust, and that would be the only out in the game for it or something. And it's unfortunate that it's so limited and so niched to that one color,
right?
That one leader.
Yeah, when someone complains about something on Facebook, people are just like, "Oh, you get to play Cold Bloodlust." So like, "Oh, okay, I can only play one of 5 leaders." That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I do think that it would be beneficial as a competitive player because I think using the cards like that will increase a player's skill cap, or at least your win percentage. The better you are as a player, the higher win percentage you are using that card.
Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, those kind of cards and those games will deter a lot of new players from playing the game. And because, let's say a good player, just an average good player is playing against a new player, they'll never win a game if the guy's playing 4 Cold Bloodlust and 4 of these other cards that do something just equally as broken. They're not going to be able to play the game at all, you know, throughout the course of the game. They won't know when they're playing with those cards what to counter on your opponent's board, essentially, you know, and that can come into some sort of skill play, whatever. But I think a lot of that has to deter new players from playing. And I do agree with Bandai when they made a statement about that. So, I think there's pros and cons. Again, as a competitive player, I would like to play with more interactive cards.
Yeah. And
I do think they are releasing them, just not in the way that we want them or expect them immediately. So, like the new cards from Set 5, there's a Krillin that when you combo with him, you put a card into rest. You know, or if you combo a King Yemma, or you put a card on. Or no, actually, you play a card and you put cards from their drop area. You know, you're kind of preparing for those late game bombs that way.
Yep.
You know, you're interacting with their bombs in that way, and not just immediate answers. You know, that's a big one. Giving us interactive play, but it's not the way you think it is.
Right. Yeah, and I think it gets to a point where it's not so much like Yu-Gi-Oh, where like one of my things with Yu-Gi-Oh is that there's so many moving parts, and it's like, yeah, it is very confusing, especially for newer players. Like, when do I activate this at what time, and what's the appropriate time to do this? And I do agree with that. I think I'd like to see something implement more Cold Bloodlust, Crusher Ball-esque things, or very slowly. Like, I don't know, maybe 1 to 2 different counterplays, like per set, maybe something like that. I think would be very good. I definitely want them to give us more cards that cater to good players, because I think if you give people auto bombs, that they're going to win games they shouldn't win. Talk about things like maybe like Cell Chain or Chain Zeno, but if you give people cards that have niche applications and require skill to use, it definitely helps, I think, good and practiced players. But at the same time, I do definitely see your point. I definitely don't want to deter any new players from playing the game.
I will say this: I think it's better for a company like Bandai when their game has higher variance, because that means newer players are going to win and steal wins more often. And I think if they're doing that, they're enjoying the game more, and that means they're going to be buying the more product. And that's the thing about us as players. We want more Bloodlust. We want more Crusher Ball. You know, and I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. As a player, I do want that. But it doesn't make sense from Bandai, because it would reduce the variance of their game, and it would create this complex where you know, newer players are not winning as often, which means they're not buying this product as often. I think that's kind of the mindset that they're falling under, and I think that's kind of the thing that Yu-Gi-Oh did as well. And it's just I think it's a business model. As competitive players, if we really wanted something like that, we could create our own format or something like that. But and I do think that they are planning to release more counterplays, though. Like because they release so much Deflect and so much Killy Zone cards, like they Killy Zone and stuff like that play around the counterplays. I do think that they are gearing up for a big release of counterplay cards for each color. So I do think they will. I don't think that Cold Bloodlust and Crusher Ball are going to be the only ones that we get. I don't think so. But I don't think we're going to get anything as powerful as those effects either. Right. I think a lot of them will be like, you know, play this card, your opponent's gets minus 10k power on their battle card. When your opponent plays a card, you know, you basically get minus 10k power on it or something. You know, something like that. It'll be something along those lines, you know. Maybe like an instant kill spell, but kind of not, you know.
Right.
And I do like the direction that Bandai is going with the game, though. In this game, turns are not as simple as people like to think, you know. A lot of the time when I'm charging, that's the longest time I take in my turn, because I'm not only planning out my turn, but I want to know I'm planning out what my opponent is going to do against me on his following turn. And it all comes down to what I charge in my charge phase. I know it sounds weird, but these are the things that you have to think about. Because when you're planning your turn, you also have to plan your opponent's turn for them, knowing what they're capable of doing. And so like, you know, I do like the direction is, you know, interacting with their deck as a whole and not interacting with cards individually. But as they release more standalone good cards like Adult Cost Vegeta and Mira, they're going to need to have standalone good answers to those cards.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I definitely
do agree that we do need them. We do need them if they're going to release more like bombs like that. But yeah, as much delayed as much as possible, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely dig that point. Yeah, I think as the card pool just increases, I think we're going to see you know, more skill in deck building, more skill in like putting certain strategies together, and I definitely do think they're going to need be answers that are going to be kind of required to do different things like that. So I definitely agree with you there. So I have a question for you. So I know you mentioned the other night when we were talking in the team chat, you were like, oh, well, I don't think I'm one of the best players on the team, but I think I'm like one of the better deck builders. And I disagree with you to the point that I think you're one of the best players and one of the best deck builders on the team. Like me, you put together a crazy deck like Hercule. You've won a regional under your belt. So I wanted to ask, what do you think sets you personally apart as such a good deck builder and player? Because oftentimes players are not both. So I want to know what you think personally sets you apart.
Well, when I walk into, first and foremost, I don't think this game is solved at all. I think if we were to look back at old formats and old decks we were playing, we would laugh at the cards and the deck choices. Okay, but I think that's even more so now when the card pool is as big as it is, right? For me as a player, I'm always, I consider myself a 6 out of 10. And I don't consider very many players to be more than a 6 out of 10. I think a lot of us are all about that level and then maybe below it, okay? But what makes us the better players, or what makes the good players, sets apart the good players from the best players, I think, is recognizing that and always trying to get better. Like no matter what, I am always trying to better myself. I bought some books that I thought would help me with my deck building. I bought Patreon dollars to read different content. You know, I'm always researching and trying to be better. Okay, I'm not just settling. Yeah, I could tell myself, yeah, I won a regional, I'm one of the best in the world, whatever. But I wouldn't feel it because I really need, you know, I need to get better. I know that, you know. I want to get better. I try to get better no matter what. No matter what level you're at, you need to try to just continue to get better if you want to take this game competitively serious. You know, I went out and I bought Next Level Deck Building, which is a Magic the Gathering book. It talks about deck building philosophies in Magic, but there's a lot of core principles in this book that will translate to Dragon Ball Super. And I have no intention of playing Magic the Gathering. I haven't played this game in 15 years, but I know that there's a lot of stuff in here that I can gain value from. Another example is, you know, Patreons. I give, you know, Matt Combs $1. I give Trey Faircloth $1. You know, I'm okay with that because they produce content, or at least Matt does. He produces a lot of content, and I'm able to absorb more information, you know. And then maybe it's not he's teaching me anything in specific, but just core principles of how he understands the game is equated in those articles that I can kind of pick up and to see how he views the game, you know, if anything. But those are obviously good for all levels. You know, I watch more YouTube videos. I just do as much research as I can. You know, I'm subscribed to all the YouTubers. I watch all their videos just to see where their heads are at, you know, and to see where I'm at stacked up against them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really respect that grounded approach to it. Like there's always gonna be someone better at you at something. So the fact that you can like maintain that composure and just say that, okay, I can constantly get better. That's gonna constantly increase your ceiling personally, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate those words too. You know, I mean, it is at the end of the day, I'm a competitive player. I want to be the best, right? It helps to hear those that you're progressing and that, you know, the things that you're doing, it's showing to other people. So it does help, you know, to hear those things. And I really do appreciate it. I think you have grown so much as a player since I met you and Tracy, which was back in March of this year.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that in the beginning of the video, and I kind of forgot to. Wanted to get right into the questioning, but yeah, I mean, I met Chris at a super release tournament for Set 3 in Tracy, California. I lived in California for a year. I currently live in Boston, but yeah, I met him out there, and you know, I had actually met the other Shenron guys before that at a Fresno release event I played SS3 over there, and then when we went to the Tracy event, I decided to play Kid Goku because I was just like over the mecha format, and I just wanted to play a deck that I wanted to play. And I got paired I got paired up against Welchy, and he was playing mecha veggies, and it was actually a pretty close match. We went to game 3, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome. So yeah, I mean, we were chit chatting and having a good time and everything, and he complimented me on my deck, which is cool, and he was like, "Yo, I got the juice, like this Broly package. It gives Mecha the mid game it needs." And I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty dope. That's pretty awesome." And yeah, so that was awesome meeting you there. But we didn't really connect much further than that until I joined Shenron. But once we joined Shenron, you guys were super open to me, and that was awesome.
Of course. So. No, you've been great. It's honestly been great having you, dude. Honestly, you're just very positive, and you are also trying to get better. You understand that as well. And that's one of the things we love about you. That at the end of the day, we're also just friends. And we interact as friends and not just competitive gamers too. So
yeah, definitely.
That's another thing that makes Shenron like the best, in my opinion. It's not just a team; it's also a group of friends.
Oh, 100%. Like I was pretty good friends already with Marcus and Caleb, like before entering the team, and the fact that I had those friendships, and the fact that everyone endorses the team as a friendship based thing, it was just a super easy transition, and it's just super duper comfortable. Yeah. So real quick, back to the card game stuff, and enough off the sappy hard eyes. What are your thoughts on a set 5 card pool? Like, what do you think about it, and how it's going to impact the game, and things like that?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, set 5 is a whole monster, and I think a lot of it comes down to packages, and I can get into that a little bit. Packages are groups of cards that interact with each other and work together.
Yep.
Okay, so the new wish leaders really they take advantage of heavy packages like veggies or Ultra Instinct, or just along those lines of packages, right? But what I've found is, I don't want to give too much away. A lot of people need to do their own testing.
Right.
But you'll notice which packages stand out as more consistent. They're just better overall than others. So certain packages, I can say, like Ultra Instinct Goku has a great payoff with UI sign Goku, right?
Yep.
But the cards you have to run are not so good. So until then, you're just going to be like degenerating card advantage and not really doing much, just trying to survive until you can put apart like this really nice combo, right?
Yep.
So you'll notice certain packages are not as good, and but I think packages in general are very important, and knowing which packages are necessary in the projected metagame. So I think a lot of it comes down, people don't know what is going to be the projected metagame, and I think you can kind of guess what it'll be based off what people have been playing and what packages you think are good. So I think, it's not going to be perfect, but I think set 5 is pretty wide open though. There's a lot of different decks that are competitively viable, and a lot of cool different new archetypes are going to pop up that you might never even have thought of before. So a lot of very exciting time. But when I look at where to start, a lot of the time I'm looking at what are the developers trying to push on us. What are the cards that they're releasing that they want us to buy, what they want us to do well with in tournaments? That's kind of what I look at first. So I look at Shenron, Wish Leader, and Sorbet and Gohan, and these are leaders that have gained so much support. But there's also a lot of support for older leaders and older strategies that if you dig deep enough, you're gonna find. So I don't want to give too much away, but that's where I would start.
For sure.
What are the developers trying to push?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely take a look at the old reliable decks. Like the Storm, like the Chain Zenos, like the Cell Chains, and you gotta see set those up as the wall and see what your deck can do against those different decks. Another quick question: what do you think? So playing a Wish deck from testing it, it's like almost playing an entirely different game. So how do you think Wish kind of fits into the overall scheme that is Dragon Ball Super, the card game?
Well, thematically, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's thematically pretty cool.
The Dragon Balls and having the whole wishing and bringing out Shenron and having this thing, I think that's awesome. Okay, does it seem too cute for Dragon Ball Super? I don't know.
That's still something left to be determined by tournament results and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of paradoxes when it comes to building them. I'm not sure if you wanted me to talk about like building them, or do you want me to talk about how they're going to interact with older strategies?
Oh no,
Because like I guess older strategies, they make a lot of older decks, older packages viable. You know, like one I could talk about is maybe King Cold. King Cold, he reduces the cost of all Frieza clan, right? Frieza clan, 5 or less or 5 or higher by 2, right?
Yep.
So because of a card like World Peace, where you can play it for no specified cost, essentially, you know, King Cold can be played very easily, and then with that, you can manipulate your drop area and get back other Friezas, and so a card like that might become playable, and other Frieza clan cards might become playable. You know, you'll have to look at that package yourself and objectively identify if it's playable or not. But things like that in general will become playable. So I think the wish strategies in general will breathe life into older, almost unplayable stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And it's really going to be, again, what you project the meta to be and how your packages interact with the current meta and what that meta would be. So, yeah, a lot of it will come down to projected meta.
Yeah, I mean, a couple years playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and this is going to be obviously all of our first Nat season for Dragon Ball. I don't think I've ever gone into a Nationals for a game and had it been so wide open. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's really awesome, man. It really favors good deck builders, I think.
Yeah.
Where this is like people aren't really sure where to start and what to play and what's going to be the best deck, you know? So a deck builder is going to be able to look at card pool over and over and find the strategy, you know, to take advantage of. So, but I also think that there's also trends when it comes to newer formats that you have to be aware of. You know, people like to test new strategies in the beginning. So a deck like Aggro, which is already tried and true, like Storm, for instance, that deck is just going to wreak havoc in a tournament like that, you know, where a lot of people just want to, like, you know, almost have fleshed out their ideas, but not fully.
Right.
So the tried and true strategies might still be the best ones to go with. You know, you really have to objectively identify those yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And just because a new set's coming out, you can't kind of push to the side old existing strategies like, oh, a new set came out, so Storm got power crept. That's not really how it's going to go down.
No, that's not how it's going to go whatsoever. Yeah, the card pool isn't deep enough for one set to just drastically change the game like this.
Definitely. Well, Chris, if you could give one final piece of advice to all the players out there listening, what would it be?
Do your research. Go out and buy a book or read a blog, or, you know, if you want to get better at this game, you have to do the work yourself. You can join a group and you guys can talk about the game. That's still, you have to doing work. You can do that, you know, but go out and take that step. You know, like I said, buy a book or put $1 into Patreon, or, you know, just subscribe to all the YouTubers and watch all their videos. You know, just got to really put in the time. Yeah, man. Research is so important.
Absorb all the free content. $1 is not asking very much, especially for the type of content you get from something like 3XG. So definitely 100%.
Absolutely.
All right, well, Chris, I really appreciate you coming on and giving a lot of your wisdom to the players out there. Thank you very much.
Happy to be here, buddy. Thank you for having me.
No problem, guys. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the podcast. I think this is probably going to be the best episode yet, with just the most information. So definitely hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you have not yet subscribed to CWTCG. My name's Joey, and we will see you next time.